Alright, today I am going... Alright, I just got off work here at Federal Express of... That's a copyright claim. Just got off work here at FedEx, and I am going to review a movie on my way home from work. The movie today is going to be Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, which I had the opportunity to view yesterday, and it was certainly whelming. It didn't quite live up to the hype that I thought it was going to, and it also didn't really live up to the controversy that I thought it was going to either. So let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about it. So Licorice Pizza tells the story of a summer where Alana and Gary end up falling in love, and it tells sort of the comings and goings of their lives and chronicles what happened. Well, Alana is the youngest of like 5 sisters, and she's 25 years old, and Gary is a 15-year-old high school student, and Gary is also an actor. He's a businessman, and I believe he only has a mother who's not really part of his life most of the time. She runs a advertising firm, and he sort of helps out on the side, and Alana takes school pictures, and that's what she does. Nothing too interesting. Now, there was a lot of controversy in this movie about Gary being 15 and Alana being 25, and I really thought that there would be more controversy to go on, but the movie really doesn't push this narrative between the two of them super hard. They do end up sharing a kiss at the end and saying they love each other, but it's not like it's super pressed in the movie. If you didn't know their ages, it wouldn't really change a whole lot. And the movie does acknowledge, especially in the beginning, Alana, when Gary is trying to make advances on her, keeps saying ew, and what do you want, and then she expresses to her friend later in the movie that she thinks it's weird that she hangs out with 15-year-old Gary and his 15-year-old friends. And so I really don't think that part of the movie is as controversial as people like to say it is. Now, there is another scene in the movie that I believe is as controversial as people claim it to be, and it is where the owner of the Japanese restaurant, whose name is escaping me right now, is sitting with his wife at the PR firm, trying to get advertisement done, and he's talking to her in an excessively racist way. And I didn't really have the context when I saw the scenes outside of the movie, but it's really clear just from the scenes out of context that it's pretty racist. Basically, she talks to him in Japanese, and then he talks back to her in this full Japanese voice, and it's really racist. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's just the art, and they're just depicting, how people were in that time period, the 70s. But I don't really think it matters in the scope. If you took the scene out of the movie, it wouldn't change the movie. You wouldn't have any significantly different plot elements or... Come on, get over. It wouldn't change any part of the movie if you had left that scene out. It doesn't serve to acknowledge any kind of racism or, you know, how to identify and deal with those kinds of racists in particular. It doesn't really shed any historical light besides this guy's an asshole, and it's really played more as a joke than anything, and that's what makes it racist in my opinion. It, like I said, it doesn't really add anything to the movie. So yeah, I believe if you can leave that part out, then what's the purpose of having it in the first place? What observation are you really making about racism as a whole? Or are you just making a racist character because you want a racist character in your movie? Anyways, there was a lot to do with Gary that I thought was kind of weird. Like, for one, he has this whole business enterprise on top of him being like an actor, and I understand that this takes place during the summer, so he's not worried about school, but he does travel to New York with Alana as his chaperone to do a press tour for the play that he does or something like that, and you know, that's fine. But when we start getting into his business enterprises, I think that's when things get a little bit weird. See, he comes up with this scheme to sell these water beds for a pretty low price, and you know, that's fine. They make this little store. I'm not really exactly sure how he was able to secure a store space for it. But initially he is selling it out of like a convention, which is, you know, fine and logical. But as it progresses, they start selling a shit ton of these water beds. They make a lot of money, but then there is a massive oil crisis, and there is this cool little scene between, you know, Alana and Gary where she's trying to explain to him that this oil crisis is going to destroy the waterbed business because oil is what you use to make plastics and synthetics, and the materials basically needed to make those waterbeds aren't going to be cheap anymore. So, and it really serves to highlight the maturity difference between Alana and Gary, and you know, how much older and more experienced she is than him, which is sort of a neat thing. I do believe that they do give up on the waterbed business eventually, and that leads me to, at the very end of the business venture, essentially, when gas is super expensive, they take a trip to this guy's house to set up a waterbed for him, and he's played by Bradley Cooper. And Bradley Cooper's a little out of place in this movie. He doesn't look like a guy from the 70s. He looks like a guy dressed up as a parody of a guy from the 70s. And there's this... He doesn't really talk like the rest of the characters. He talks like Bradley Cooper, and that's a little out of place and weird, I think, here. They hit the very first interaction we really have with him is this weird conversation between him and Gary, where he is really emphatic about how the way he pronounces Barbra Streisand, and it's, I don't know. It just seemed not funny. I don't know if it was really supposed to be played straight, but it definitely wasn't very funny. But there's this whole scene where they're setting up his waterbed, and then they go to leave in their big truck, and they find him walking down the road. You know, he's kind of a dickhead, so they don't really want to pick him up, but they pick him up and help him to go get gas. Well, they had sabotaged his house because of the fact that he was an asshole, so it you know, it's a little awkward picking him up, even though they know what they did and he doesn't know yet. But so they pick him up and they go to get gas, and then they leave him at the gas station, and then they go back to where his car is abandoned, and Gary decides to trash it. Well, when they go to leave, and they run out of gas. Well, I sort of have a difficult time believing that they would run out of gas when they're going through a massive gas crisis, and so obviously they would be paying closer attention to how much gas they have and what the price of gas is. But they also were at the gas station with Bradley Cooper, so they wouldn't have even bothered to check how much gas they had then. That just strikes me as a little unrealistic. I get that they're kids, but I mean, Alana's 25 and she's the one who's driving, so you would think that she would be able to see that they had low gas before they were completely out of gas. It just seems like a little strange to me, little forced by the plot. But then there is this really neat scene where, you know, they're up in the hills in Hollywood, and Alana basically backs the truck all the way down the hill and then coasts it into a gas station, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty neat scene, and that's probably as close as we get to an action scene. There's another scene that's sort of weird, where Gary is just abducted by the police because they think he matches the description of a murderer, and he's at the police station for like 5 minutes, and then they let him go, and he just leaves with Alana, and then they never address that again. That's a little strange. There's another scene where Alana is being stalked by this man, and then she goes and confronts him, and we never see him again, even though that scene is after that scene, there's scenes of her walking alone at night by herself, you know, and that would be a good time to reintroduce that stalker character or create some kind of tension. But no, nothing comes of that. He's just never brought up again. There's this really strange scene where Alana is volunteering to work with this politician, and essentially what happens is he invites her to a drink, but when she gets there, his boyfriend is there, and she kind of just sits there awkwardly while they argue, and then she leaves with his boyfriend, and then they have this conversation about how men are dicks, and then they hug it out, and she leaves. Very strange and out of place, I think. Now, I get that some of these scenes might be construed in a way where it's like, oh, well, you know, these are just random happenings that happen to one person, but it makes the movie feel disjointed and weird, and I'm just not really so sure that it paints a complete narrative. But it gets even weirder So I mentioned earlier about Gary's business with the waterbeds and whatnot, and how that led him to Bradley Cooper's weird character. Well, after the waterbed business dissolves and the world's ending or whatever, he ends up getting involved with Alana and the politician guy, helping them film a commercial for him, and that's where things get a little spotty too. He learns through the grapevine of working there that pinball is going to become legal in California, and he wants to monopolize on that. So I guess he uses his money from the business to open a big old arcade in the same spot where he used to have the waterbed business. And, you know, mind you, all of these events are happening over the course of like 3 months. And so he's got this big successful pinball business on the first day, and it just seems a little weird. Remember, this kid's 15 years old, you know. How on earth would he, you know, really get this all together? But I digress. Now, the best scenes in this movie are when nothing's really happening. When the characters are just allowed to do weird little characters and do weird little people things. And I don't want to shit on this movie the entire video, because there were some things that I did enjoy. Like I said, I did enjoy the scene where Alana backs the big truck down the hill. That's pretty cool. You know, that's not exactly what it's a little subversion of expectations, because we expected Bradley Cooper to, you know, discover them trashing his car, but they ended up pulling it out. There's a scene where Alana is kind of getting wined and dined by this filmmaker guy, and this other filmmaker dude goads him into doing this motorcycle stunt. And so they're outside of this restaurant, and he decides to jump his motorcycle over this big thing of fire, and he wants Alana to ride on the back of it, and he's kind of drunk and she's drunk, and he goes to take off on the motorcycle, and she falls over right on the ground. You know, it really plays up the scene where we think that, you know, she's going to be in this real dangerous situation because of him being drunk on this motorcycle, but she ends up just lying in the dirt, and Gary running after her to make sure she's okay. So that's a cute scene. There's another scene where Gary is reading lines or filming a commercial for these people, and he's doing this JCPenney suit commercial, and he keeps taking pieces off of the suit and wearing it different ways, and he's like, you can wear this suit in 7 different ways, and then he'd be like this, and then he'd change it, and then he'd run off the camera and change it again, and like this, and run back on the camera. You know, cute scenes like that. And there's some nice scenes between Gary and Alana, and the interactions between Alana and her family are interesting. You know, discovering why she's so insecure and why she's not very mature. And a lot of those things do serve to make the plot of them falling in love make sense. But I just don't think that overall it makes the movie particularly exciting. I don't know if this is supposed to be more of like a... It kind of seems like the whole movie is a 15-year-old boy's fantasy of his own successes and him falling in love with an older woman, but it's sort of played from Alana's perspective, and it just doesn't... There's some disconnect between how the movie presents itself and how it wants you to perceive it, is sort of what I'm trying to get at. But I don't know. So I gotta wrap up this video here, so I'll give my final thoughts. I don't think that I'll ever watch this movie again. I don't think it was it was just sort of alright. If I had to rate this movie, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. The performances were pretty great. The cinematography was really good. There were some really pretty scenes, and there were some cool scenes at night, especially with some, you know, real nice lights, and it really portrayed living in the 70s pretty good, I think. There was a lot of really cool period cars and whatnot, but I think that the inclusion of Bradley Cooper's character, some of the weird disconnects between, you know, what reality would be like for a 15-year-old boy in the 70s, and a lot of the plot threads just not really ending up anywhere. I think that it gives the movie, it leaves a lot to be desired, and I think that they could have shaved half an hour off of this movie and had a stronger piece, really. That's a big bird. So overall, I'm gonna give it like a 6 out of 10. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it was pretty entertaining. I liked the characters for the most part. Have you seen this movie? I don't know. Bleep bloop it down below if you want. I'm home from my drive home from work, so thanks for watching. I'm still driving, so I'm not gonna stop the phone. I'll just let you go. Okay, bye.